Thank you very much, Aruni and Manan Petit. Thank you very much. It was an excellent brief. Aruni, I was getting so much information about the background history about the Sikh demand to Khalistan. Good evening, everyone. Everyone, I'm Zareena Abdul Azeez, attorney, and as an international human rights defender, observed the journey of the Sikh demand Khalistan in India. The most of the human rights abuses involving grave violation of right to life, the right not to be tortured, and right not to be arbitrarily arrested and detained. Murders of people for expressing their views can never be justified, whether the perpetrators are the government or those opposing them. The legal safeguards that will apply in Punjab have clearly failed to prevent gross human rights violations. Sikh community have been the target of increasingly severe religious and political violence in India. The challenges confronting many Sikhs in India today, with the ascendance of Hindu nationalism reaffirmed under the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Sikhs are increasingly cast as the other in contemporary Indian society. Religious and political violence are common against a variety of religious minorities in India, but Sikhs are particularly vulnerable group. Hundreds of Sikhs have been detained and interrogated in India related to support of Khalistan under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act known as UAPA in Punjab. 99% of those charged under UAPA have been Sikhs. Indian authorities are using draconian counter-terrorism laws against activists simply for criticizing or raising their voices against injustice. Presently, Sikhs face a particularly harsh combination of political, religious, economic, and social persecutions in India. The situation may deteriorate further unless the Indian government take determined action to halt these practices and prevent further human rights violations by establishing a comprehensive program to protect human rights. We urge the government to consider implement the program and using its shelf and international standards, and with the view to further enhancing the protection and promotion of human rights in Punjab. With reference to Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch, I highly recommend. Number 1, regarding detainees, unacknowledged detention and disappearances. The government should order a review of all cases of people detained without charge or trial in Punjab. Number 2, all those making arrest should be instructed to identify themselves, to inform the person to be arrested and his relatives to reasons for the arrest and the grounds on which the arrest is made. Number 3, the government should prohibit the practice of holding detainees in secret places of detention. All persons arrested should be held in police stations and station, jail, or other officially recognized places of detention, and their detention should be subject to the effective control of the judicial authorities. 4, the government should maintain registered update on a daily basis of all arrests and detentions. Number 5, relatives, lawyers, doctors, and relevant persons should have access to these registers and should immediately be informed of the places of detention and transfers. Number 6, any members of the police or security forces failing to register or giving false information about arrest should invariably be subject to appropriate proceedings. Implementation of those recommendations would contribute to bringing Indian practice into line with important standards adopted by the United Nations. Article 9.2 of the International Covenants of Civil and Political Rights, to which India is a party, provides that anyone who is arrested shall at times of arrest be promptly informed of the reasons of arrest and of any charge against him. Number 2, regarding torture, the government should order impartial investigation into all allegations of torture or ill treatment, and victims should receive adequate compensation. All those detained or imprisoned should promptly be medically examined, be allowed to request an independent body for second medical examination, and written records should be kept of finding of this examination, to which all concerned parties shall be ensured access. The government should abolish all forms of torture and ill treatment that are recognized as cruel, inhuman, and degrading by international standards, notably the detention of people for long period in iron fetters. The government should issue strict instruction that torture, illegal detention, including of parents, women, and children of wanted person, and extrajudicial killing of perceived opponent in staged encounters or escapes will not be tolerated. The government should demonstrate its commitment to protect human rights by invariably bringing those responsible for torture, extrajudicial execution, and disappearances to justice. There should be no immunity from persecution in law or practice for any member of the security forces responsible for such human rights violations, and any legal provisions providing for such immunity should be repealed. These recommendations are based on a number of different international human rights standards. The ICCPR, to which India is a party, prohibits all forms of torture and cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment under any circumstances. Article 4 of the ICCPR emphasizes that even in emergency situation, no state may be derogate from its obligation not to permit torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Also, number 3, regarding substantive allegations of tortures. The government should establish a fully impartial and independent body consisting of people chosen for their integrity and trusted by all sections of the community, empowered to investigate substantive allegations of torture, claims that detainees are kept in unacknowledged detention or may have been killed in custody, and all killings in disputed circumstances by a security services. In order to effective, such a body should have full and effective powers to take interim measures to prevent or halt impending or ongoing human rights violations, to compel attendance of witnesses and production of relevant documents. It should be empowered to take effective measures to protect witnesses and potential witnesses from all forms of threat and intimidations. Another component, independent and impartial body should have full and effective powers to make unannounced visit to the places where people are believed to be held in unacknowledged detentions. In case of deaths in the custody or people who have died in suspicious circumstances in armed clashes with the police, the relative should have access to the postmortem reports and be allowed to have representative attend the postmortem examination based on the principles of the effective prevention and investigation of extra-legal, arbitrary and summary execution. Also, the government have a specific obligation to uphold and protect human rights. Arbitrary detention, torture and extrajudicial killing of opponent are specially prohibits by international law. In the case of armed non-governmental groups also, there can never be a moral or legal justification for arbitrary or indiscrimination killing of people in Punjab. Also, government take fully accountable to include legal responsibility for unjustifiable excess which might lead to enforced of involuntary disappearances. Also, the Indian government should institute a training program for all members of the security forces involved in the arrest, interrogations and the detention of suspect in Punjab. Also, the victim of torture, wrongful arrest and in case of extrajudicial executions and disappearances, their relatives should be given full and adequate compensation. International human rights standards have been made by and are addressed specially to governments. Countries which have become a party to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights are legally bound to respect and ensure the rights protected in it. Circumstances protect the right to life and the freedom of torture. Thank you, dear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abdulaziz, for sharing your insightful comments on the topic Sikhism and Khalistan, especially on the...
Thank you very much, all panel members and international community. We request the Indian government accountability would be improved by the implementation of a range of provisions contained in international human rights law. Article 10 of United Nations Declaration on Protection of All Persons from being subject to torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment calls for criminal proceedings to be instituted against allegation offenders in accordance with the national law and the Article 18 of the UN Principles on the effective prevention and investigation of the extra-legal, arbitrary and summary execution calls on Indian governments to ensure that person identified by investigation as having participated in extra-legal, arbitrary and summary executions are brought to justice. And also, we demand Indian government to accept a legal obligation to observe these standards when it signed and ratified the ICCPR in 1979. Thereby, we clearly stating to the international community that it considered itself bound to uphold and protect these fundamental rights and the human rights. Also, the Indian government has persistently failed to do that. Therefore, Indian government should accept the legal obligation to observe these standards when it is signed and ratified the ICCPR in 1979. Thereby, we request today as an international community that Indian government must consider itself bound to uphold and enhancing the protection and promoting of human rights in Punjab. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you for providing the opportunity for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights panelists as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abdulaziz. So now to hear